Imhotep. It is Tuesday, October 20th, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. Well, look, it's been a very busy day. It's only Tuesday. It's been a busy week, a lot going on. We know Thursday is the second and final debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We see a new poll just came out, and Joe Biden is up 9 points nationally. There's so much going on. More people are coming out. More Republicans are coming out in support of Joe Biden. So we're going to deal with, we talked some about this on Monday's show. We've been covering all of this. So on today's show, we're going to deal with a big update in the Breonna Taylor case. You see, we posted an article about this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network, it got over 2,000 likes. We see that a judge has ordered the release of records in the Breonna Taylor case. A Kentucky judge has ordered records in the proceedings released to show if, quote, publicly elected officials are being honest, end quote. And then a juror that was on the grand jury has said that the grand jury did not agree that the fatal shooting was justified. A juror is speaking out. A grand juror who heard evidence in the Breonna Taylor probe said Tuesday that the grand jury did not agree that her death was justified. So we'll talk about this, and we see that attorney Benjamin Crump is also asking for an independent investigator into the killing of Breonna Taylor. So we'll deal with that story. And then also we posted an article back on October 13th on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. And this dealt with hip hop artist Killer Mike. Hip hop artist Killer Mike. He's in the documentary Elementary Genocide from director Raheem Shabazz. He's in installment 1. I'm in installment 3 of the documentary Elementary Genocide from director Raheem Shabazz. But hip hop artist Killer Mike, we know he's an activist, and he is for the upliftment of African Americans. Well, he is teamed up with former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young, and also Ryan Glover, the founder of Bounce TV, to form a digital bank, a Black-owned and Latinx-owned digital bank that will make supporting Black-owned banks and businesses a little easier. So we posted this article back on October 13th. It got, I think, maybe 2,000 likes, something like that. It was something crazy. And then Killer Mike was interviewed on MSNBC by Stephanie Rule. So we're going to share that interview with you and talk a little bit about this as well. This is something great that Killer Mike is doing. He is, investing in the African-American community. He is usually doing positive things to help support his people. Now, I did a Facebook post today on my personal page, Michael Imhotep, and then shared it on my fan page, The African History Network. On the fan page, it got, last time I checked, it got over 4,000 likes. I didn't know it was going to blow up like that, but hey. And I said that, so on Monday, 50 Cent, hip hop artist 50 Cent, some people call him 2 cents or 2 bits. A bit is a 12 and a half cents. So a bit is, that's an old term for 25 cents, 2 bits. A bit is 12 and a half cents. But he tweeted regarding Joe Biden's tax plan. Joe Biden has talked about how his tax plan will not raise taxes on people making under $400,000 a year. Well, we know 50 Cent makes over $400,000 a year, right? So he tweeted basically that his support for Donald Trump because of Joe Biden's tax plan. It'll cost 50 Cent to have to pay a lot more in taxes. Poor 50, right? Okay, poor 50. If he has to pay, if the wealthy have to pay more in taxes. Well, he caught a lot of backlash on social media about that. And, I posted, we've talked about Ice Cube and his contract with Black America. I was on Roland Martin's show on Friday, October 16th. We talked about that. We talked about that here some on this show as well. We went through and compared Donald Trump's Fool's Gold plan to Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America, the 22-page agenda. I talked about how, Ice Cube has a lot of good things in his plan. He's still learning. He's not a policy expert. He admits this. He's still learning. We'll need to tear him down and just shred him and destroy him publicly. He's learning. But I said the difference between Ice Cube and 50 Cent is Ice Cube is trying to help his people. 50 Cent is trying to help himself. Ice Cube is trying to help his people. 50 Cent is trying to help himself. There was a interview that Ice Cube did on Fox Soul with the Queens and Cocktails, Vivica Fox, Claudia Jordan. People check that out also. But check out the about approximately 40-minute video that he did with Roland Martin on October 15th, 2020. It's on YouTube, Roland Martin on YouTube, and then also on Facebook, Roland Martin as well. All right. So, and then, this past Sunday, October 18th, we went through and did part 6, breaking down Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America. And we dealt with criminal justice reform. Okay. And I'm actually showing you what's in the plan. People go to joebiden.com. This is not an endorsement. Go to joebiden.com, read the entire plan. Pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment. Pages 2 through 11 deal with economic empowerment. Then compare that to Donald Trump's platinum plan. And then you tell me whose plan is better. This is not about Ice Cube, because Ice Cube's not running for president. It's between Joe Biden's plan and Donald Trump's plan. All right. So we'll talk some about Killer Mike's Black Bank to support Black businesses. This collaboration with Ryan Glover and former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young. And then also Tulsa, Oklahoma is back in the news as well. So we know Tulsa, Oklahoma is where Black Wall Street was, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine Business District, known as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's formed right around 1905, beginning in the early 1900s. And it's a very prosperous town. You've heard me talk about it many times. I have a 2.5-hour lecture I've done dealing with the history of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, we know the massacre took place January 1st. June 1st, 1921. The massacre takes place June 1st, 1921. You have somewhere around 15,000 white people who invade that morning. And somebody sent me a message on Facebook. All right. You have about 15,000 African Americans you have about 15,000 white people who invade that morning, June 1st. And there's a massacre that takes place. Now we fight back, we shoot back, but we're outnumbered. And you're going to have a lot of the North Tulsa burned to the ground. North Tulsa is where the African Americans lived. South Tulsa is where the white people lived, because you're dealing with segregation. What separates North Tulsa from South Tulsa is the railroad tracks. Okay, so you're going to have at least 300 African Americans killed. Some estimates are higher. The 300 comes from the Red Cross. The Red Cross sets up a makeshift hospital in Booker T. Washington High School to tend to those who are wounded, etc. And according to their count, 300 were killed, mostly African Americans. But we fought back, we shot back. You had a lot of retired World War I veterans who lived in North Tulsa as well. But the business district began at the intersection of Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. And this is believed that this is where the Gap Band, who's from Oklahoma, get their name from. Gap, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. So there has been an effort to find the remains of some of those who were killed in the 1921 massacre. So the Associated Press has an article picked up by NBC News. Tulsa digs again for victims of 1921 race massacre. Tulsa digs again for victims of 1921 race massacre. Okay, so we'll deal with that and more on the African History Network show. All right, so we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and also our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, as well on YouTube. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and you can sign up for our email newsletter there as well. Now, if you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHN Show through Cash App, $ TheAHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHN Show, paypal.me/TheAHN Show. All right. Okay. How much time we have before the break, Shakita? Shakita's our board operator. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600. So when you call in, Shakita will be handling the calls. You can just come on the air and let me know how much time before the break. Oh, she texts me. Okay. Okay. And you can, 2 minutes. All right. How you doing, SB? How you doing, SB and Ernest and TJ, Tawana, Lisa, David, David Neely, Tarita, Marita, just a few of the people watching us on our social media platforms. We'll probably go past the top of the hour, so we'll stay here on our social media platforms. Okay. All right. So with this Breonna Taylor story, this is a breaking news story. A grand juror who heard evidence in the Breonna Taylor probe said Tuesday that the grand jury did not agree that her death was justified. A disclosure that came after a Kentucky judge ordered records in the proceedings released to show if, quote, publicly elected officials are being honest. Now, in a statement, grand juror number 1, as the person has been identified by lawyer Kevin Glogauer, said that the only charge presented during the proceedings was wanton endangerment. The only charge presented to the grand jury was wanton endangerment. Okay, we'll continue this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. The Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. We'll be back in just a minute here. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing today? All right, so we've got a jam-packed show on Wednesday already. I've already have topics laid out for Wednesday's show. There's so much going on. So have you all early voted yet? Stand by. All right, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Stand by. Can I get through? All right. All right, we'll be back from break in 2 minutes here. Okay, you got John Dupree. Let's switch over who we have here. All right, yeah. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We can get you up and running right away. African American business owners. So we have some spots on our on our nightly show. We have a few spots left. All right, stand by. We'll be back from break in just a minute. Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Stand by. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, October 20th, 2020, and we are live. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. That's the sound of the printer in the back printing an article. So right before the break, we were talking about this big story that broke today. Juror in Breonna Taylor case said grand jury did not agree fatal shooting was justified. Juror in Breonna Taylor case said grand jury did not agree fatal shooting was justified. Then also that's NBC News. And then also CNN is reporting Breonna Taylor grand juror says panel wasn't given a chance to consider homicide charges. Breonna Taylor grand juror says panel was not given a chance to consider homicide charges. If we go back to the article from NBC News, former Louisville police detective Brett Hankinson was indicted last month, September, on that charge for firing shots into the apartment of Breonna Taylor's neighbors on March 13th, not into Breonna Taylor's partner, but into her neighbors. Okay. He damaged the drywall. Okay. No one was charged with her death. They were charged with endangering the neighbors. I think they were white neighbors. So this is what this was. Now, Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, and we're going to go to clip one in just a second here, Shakita. So cue up clip one from NBC News, NBC Now. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, whose office investigated the fatal shooting, has called the use of force justified. Now, we all know about this case, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Now, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, I want you to answer this question. How you doing, Sister Nubia? Sister Nubia Warford. We got to get her back on the show as well. She's a cultural anthropologist. You've seen the interviews I've done with this a brilliant sister dealing with ancient African history, ancient Nubia, Ta-Nehisi. So Attorney General Daniel Cameron, would you want Attorney General Daniel Cameron to be a judge? Would you want him to be? He's a black Republican. He's a mentee of Senator Moscow Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Okay. The problem is not he's a black Republican. The problem is the type of black Republican he is. Okay. Would you want to, so those who are watching, you can chat, you can answer yes or no. Would you want him? SB said, hell no. You didn't have to say that, SB. Okay. Would you want Attorney General Daniel Cameron to be a judge? Okay. Let me know, yes or no. Now, would you want Attorney Daniel Cameron to be a federal judge? All right. Let me know, yes or no. The Federal Circuit Court, the Federal Court of Appeals, would you want him to be a federal judge? Yes or no? Okay. Now, back in September, it was around September 9th, 2020, Donald Trump released a list of 20 names of people who he would nominate to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. You've heard me talk about this before. Did you know that Attorney General Daniel Cameron was one of those names that Donald Trump released on a list of 20 people in September 2020? So let's look at this for a minute, because all the people that are telling you don't vote. And on tomorrow's show, we're going to deal with a social media disinformation campaign targeting African Americans to dissuade us from voting. Okay, we're going to talk about that on Wednesday's show. That's a segment I'm preparing for Wednesday's show. I told you I already got Wednesday's show laid out. So you got people on social media complaining about what's taking place with Breonna Taylor in the case, right? But Attorney General Daniel Cameron was voted into office. He wasn't ordained by God. He didn't just walk up and say, I'll be Attorney General. He was voted into office. But when we look at the Supreme Court, the judges who are nominated to the Supreme Court, they're nominated by a president. Presidents voted into office. I understand the Electoral College. We talked about that here on this show, but Electoral College is based upon the popular vote per state. They're not ordained by God either. Okay, you become president-elect. You become president-elect the day of the election or the morning after by reaching at least 270 Electoral College votes. Okay, well, Electoral College doesn't vote till the first Monday following the second Wednesday in December. So you win the Electoral College vote, 16 in Michigan, 38 in Texas, 66 in California, 3 in Maine, 3 in Vermont. Okay, so if the president nominates Supreme Court justices, as well as the federal bench, because Trump has gotten 218 now, it's 218 federal judges confirmed. But if the president nominates them and the president's elected, well, the Supreme Court justices and federal judges are confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Well, how did they get that job? Did they just walk up and say, I want to be a U.S. senator? Or did they inherit a U.S. Senate seat? Their father, their relative died and said, I'm going to leave this in my will. You're going to be the U.S. senator? No, they were elected. Unless like Senator Kelly Loeffler, somebody resigns, a senator resigns, or a senator passes away, and then who determines who gets that seat? The governor. The governor of that state determines who gets that seat to finish out that term. But the governor was elected by the people also. So people can't, on the one hand, be upset about what's taking place with the Breonna Taylor case, but on the other hand, tell you don't vote. Because somebody like Attorney General Daniel Cameron could very well end up on the U.S. Supreme Court. Then we have Clarence Thomas Jr., we have Clarence Thomas Sr. and Clarence Thomas Jr. And that's all through the vote. Okay. Now, I'm not saying vote to vote. I'm not saying that. I'm saying vote strategically, understand the policies of the people you're voting for, vote strategically. I'm not saying vote because our ancestors died for that. I'm not saying that either. We do need to study that history, but I'm not saying that. We vote based upon policies that are going to impact us today and in the future. And sometimes it's not always about what someone can do for you. It's also understanding how to block and stop what people are trying to do to you. Because everything they're trying to do to you is also through the laws as well. This is why when I teach about political self-defense, I say we need to understand the law better than they understand the law, because basically everything they're doing to us is through the laws, through the courts. And even when they break the law, they'll then hide behind the law to justify breaking the law and go get an attorney. So we have to understand this. So Attorney General Daniel Cameron, if Donald Trump stays in office, could very well end up on the U.S. Supreme Court. He's already on the list. He's on the fast track. So we have to derail that track. Or we can end up with Clarence Thomas Sr. and Clarence Thomas Jr. on the U.S. Supreme Court. So Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, whose office investigated the fatal shooting, has called the use of force justified. Now, Breonna Taylor, 26 years old, was shot to death after officers with a no-knock warrant broke down her door during a narcotics investigation. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who fired on police based upon... Now, keep in mind, we talked about this before. The ballistics report was inconclusive. One of the ballistics reports was inconclusive. If we go look at this article from USA Today, USA Today, this was like September 27, 2020. Ballistics don't support AG claim that Kenneth Walker shot cop. USA Today. We talked about this on this show when this story broke. Also, we talked about this back September 27th. Ballistics don't support AG claim that Kenneth Walker shot cop. Is inconclusive. The Kentucky State Police report, the Kentucky State Police, the state police in Kentucky, the Kentucky State Police report says that due to limited markings of comparative value, the 9mm bullet that hit and exited Officer Mattingly was neither, quote, identified nor eliminated as having been fired, end quote, from Kenneth Walker's gun. Okay, based upon their ballistics report, Kentucky State Police, they said due to limited markings of comparative value, the 9mm bullet that hit and exited Mattingly was neither, quote, identified nor eliminated as having been fired. So they're saying it's inconclusive. Okay. Now, also, when this story came out, we found out that Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who could end up on the U.S. Supreme Court, he said that Officer Hankinson had been eliminated, Brett Hankinson had been eliminated as the shooter because they were wondering whether Officer Mattingly, who was shot in the thigh, was he shot by friendly fire or shot by Kenneth Walker? Okay. Well, Attorney General Daniel Cameron said that Hankinson, so this was when he held a press conference to reveal what the charges were. Okay, we all remember that. He said that Officer Hankinson had been eliminated as the shooter because the three officers carried .40 caliber handguns, while Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, had a 9mm. Okay, but on September 27th, that Wednesday night on CNN, Steve Romanis, one of Kenneth Walker's attorneys, revealed that he had obtained a Louisville Metro Police Department record showing that Officer Brett Hankinson had also been issued a 9mm handgun as well. We were never told this before then. Okay, read this article from September 27th, 2020 from USA Today. Ballistics don't support AG claim that Kenneth Walker shot cop. All right, let's go to clip one from NBC News. This is grand juror speaks out on Breonna Taylor case. Let's go to this clip.
Rare review, and anonymous grand juror in the Breonna Taylor case now says questions were asked about additional charges, and the grand jury was told there would be none because the prosecutors didn't feel they could make them stick, adding the jury never considered homicide charges because they were not given the option. The 26-year-old former EMT was shot and killed at her apartment in March during a botched drug raid. No officers were charged in her death, though one who pleaded not guilty was accused of wanton endangerment for firing bullets that ended up in another apartment. Kentucky's Attorney General Daniel Cameron said the actions of the two other officers were justified because they opened fire only after Taylor's boyfriend shot at them first.
The rule of law must apply.
Police say they identified themselves. Her boyfriend insists they didn't. Now the juror says the grand jury didn't agree that certain actions were justified, nor did it decide the indictment should be the only charges in the Breonna Taylor case. A case that has fueled protests worldwide. Today, a Kentucky judge ruled jurors could speak publicly.
But at this time, our clients do wish to remain anonymous. We are still assessing their position moving forward.
Grand jury proceedings are typically secret by law, but previously the Attorney General's office released 15 hours of audio recordings, revealing at one point at least the jurors wanted to hear more. Kentucky's Attorney General says he disagrees with the judge's decision, but will not appeal it, adding that he only asked for the charges that could be proven under state law. Taylor's family is asking for a new special prosecutor and another grand jury.
Okay, so that is from NBC News Now. That's on NBC News website. Name of that clip is Grand Juror Speaks Out on Breonna Taylor Case. Grand Juror Speaks Out on Breonna Taylor Case. That's from October 20th, 2020. Then also check out the article from NBCnews.com entitled Juror in Breonna Taylor Case said grand jury did not agree fatal shooting was justified. Juror in Breonna Taylor case said grand jury did not agree fatal shooting was justified. The article goes on to say that Officer Brett Hankinson was okay. So Taylor's boyfriend who they say, according to this reporting, fired on police once striking an officer, has said he believed the raid was a home invasion. Now, he said he fired his gun. The ballistics from the Kentucky State Police were inconclusive whether or not he actually hit the officer. Okay, Kenneth Walker said he fired his gun one time, but the ballistics are inconclusive whether or not he actually hit the officer. We know the officer. We know Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly was shot in the thigh, but it's inconclusive based upon the ballistics report that the Kentucky State Police cited. Is inconclusive if Kenneth Walker actually hit the officer. Now, let's see if we go back and let's see. All right. Officer Brett Hankinson was the only officer charged in the incident, and none of the officers, including the one who Attorney General Daniel Cameron says fired the fatal shot, faced charges directly related to Breonna Taylor's death. Now, in the statement, the grand juror said that homicide laws were not explained during the proceedings, even though the grand jury panel, asked about them. Okay, this juror, who they're not releasing the name of this juror. This juror said said that homicide laws were not explained to the grand jury during the proceedings, even though the panel of jurors asked about them. Quote, questions were asked about the additional charges, and the grand jury was told there would be none because the prosecutors did not feel they could make them stick. The statement said, quote, the grand jury didn't agree that certain actions were justified, nor did it decide the indictment should be the only charges in the Breonna Taylor case, end quote. Now, the grand juror added that self-defense and justification laws were not explained either. Okay, the grand juror added that self-defense and justification laws were not explained either. In a separate statement, Another grand juror, represented by attorney Glogauer, said they were pleased with the judge's ruling Tuesday and, quote, "will be discussing possible next steps with counsel." We'll be discussing possible next steps with counsel. Now, the statements came after Jefferson County Circuit Court Judge Annie O'Connell ruled that records in the proceedings could be released. Okay, records in the proceedings could be released, allowing grand jury panelists to speak publicly and answer questions about the case. Now, while grand juries normally operate under the veil of secrecy, the case was unique because all parties are known to the public, and Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron has given extensive statements on the case, according to Jefferson County Circuit Court Judge Annie O'Connell. All right, so check out this article. Check out the rest of this article here from NBCnews.com. Juror in Brianna Taylor case said grand jury didn't agree, justify. Now we're going to go to this. We're going to go to this second clip here. Okay, the first clip was from NBC Nightly News. The second clip is from NBC News Now. Why Kentucky judge was able to rule Brianna Taylor grand jurors can speak publicly. Why Kentucky judge was able to rule Brianna Taylor grand jurors can speak publicly. You're going to hear NBC News Danny Savalas explain what this means for the jurors. Let's go to this clip.
Grand jurors in the Breonna Taylor case can speak publicly. Today, a Kentucky judge granted an anonymous grand juror's request to release evidence in the case, which means that juror can speak about the proceedings. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins me now. Danny, great to see you. Why did this juror file this request, and what does it mean for the other jurors?
I think you can read between the lines that why this request was made was back when the Kentucky phrased it was that, look, we presented all of this evidence to the grand jury. It was totally up to them to make the determination. They had all the facts in front of them. They were the ones that decided to only hand out the indictments they handed out. So if you're angry about anything, he implied, he didn't say that it was really the grand jury's duty and not the Kentucky Attorney General. So in response, unsurprisingly, it seems that undisclosed grand juror number one, whoever that is, wants permission or wanted permission to talk about what happened. And that's what this battle was all about. Now the court has allowed essentially the release of more information about the grand jury proceedings.
Danny, grand jury proceedings are typically kept secret. Why did the judge rule otherwise here?
They're typically kept super duper secret, but Kentucky law allows for a judge to release grand jury information. And the judge pointed out it really doesn't contain any limitations on the judge's authority or really even a guidepost to determine whether the burden to release that information is met. So the judge in this case looked at the factors that federal courts look at. And for example, the people who were indicted were already indicted. The players were already known. Everybody knows who these officers were. And probably most importantly, the trial court in which the defendants being prosecuted already released grand jury information. So this court concluded that, well, the traditional needs for secrecy are no longer present. And in this particular case, even though the default rule is that we keep everything secret, in this case, it warrants release of the information. But that's only in this case for this grand juror.
What is the Kentucky AG saying about the ruling?
Kentucky AG released a statement saying, look, I disagree, but he added some other really interesting commentary, which was, look, I only sought indictments on the crimes that I thought that we could prove. It's a slightly nuanced statement, but think about it. He's saying essentially that I only sought indictments on what I could prove, implying that maybe he didn't give grand jurors all the possibilities like homicide, everything else, because he, the Attorney General, felt that he could not get convictions on those charges. And that begins to explain what we're probably going to see, I'm guessing, in the next weeks, which is a grand juror coming forward and essentially saying, no, we didn't have all the possible charges in front of us. The conference that Daniel Cameron gave wasn't exactly accurate.
So, Danny, we know now that we could hear from grand jurors here, but how about what this means for the case going forward?
As we hear, according to the judge's order, it won't affect the case, the trial, the prosecution of Hankinson, the one police officer charged. That's in the court's opinion that released this information. We may expect to see more grand jurors come forward who want to also similarly talk, and they're going to have to file their own motion and go before the court. But we would expect that the prosecution would proceed as per normal because, as the court pointed out, in this case, all the players are known, all the information's already out there for the most part, and so it shouldn't affect, a grand juror speaking, shouldn't affect the proper prosecution of this case.
All right, so that's from NBC News Now. Check out that clip at, well, it's in the article from NBC News. Juror in Breonna Taylor case said grand jury didn't agree fatal shooting was justified. It's also at msnbc.com. All right, so you'll hear more about this development in the case as well. All right, so next story, we posted this article from yourblackworld.net. Had this article on October 13th, 2020 about hip-hop artist Killer Mike. That was picked up from CNN.com. Killer Mike's new black-owned bank receives tens of thousands of account requests in less than 24 hours. Killer Mike's hip-hop artist Killer Mike. We know in 2016 he endorsed Bernie Sanders. We know for mayor, he endorsed Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Killer Mike's new black-owned bank receives tens of thousands of account requests in less than 24 hours. A new majority Black and Latinx-owned and operated digital bank hopes to make supporting Black-owned banks and businesses a little easier for consumers. Now, the bank is called Greenwood, okay, which is the business district in North Tulsa, where Black Wall Street was. Okay, Greenwood was created by Bounce TV founder Ryan Glover and his close friend rapper activist Michael Killer Mike Render. The leadership team at Greenwood, which includes former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young, unveiled their new platform on Thursday, back about right around October 12th, after raising more than $3 million in seed funding in June 2020. Glover has been working on Greenwood since early 2019, Ryan Glover, but he said interest in the venture spiked after the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this sparked a nationwide reckoning with racism that has inspired many Americans, including many in the corporate world, to support African-American-owned businesses and financial institutions. Okay, let's go to this clip here. This is from MSNBC. Stephanie Rule interviewed Killer Mike on October 20th, 2020. Let's go to this clip.
For us, on the other side of this camera, is after it burns, will we be left with charred, or will we rise like a phoenix out of the ashes that Atlanta has always done? Will we use this as a moment to say that we will not do what other cities have done, and in fact, we will get better than we've been? If you sit in your homes tonight, instead of burning your home to the ground, you will have time to properly plot, plan, strategize, and organize and mobilize in an effective way.
That was rapper and activist Killer Mike in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. For months, he's been encouraging others to take their anger and turn it into productive action. And now he is channeling his own advice and teaming up with former Atlanta mayor and civil rights icon Andrew Young to start a digital bank to serve Black and Latino communities who are underbanked. What does that mean? Well, listen to these numbers. About 17% of Black households do not have bank accounts. Compare that to just 3% of white households. In Black-owned small businesses, are about half as likely to obtain bank loans as white-owned businesses. Well, this new plan, the Greenwood Bank Initiative, is hoping to change exactly that. I'm honored to say Killer Mike joins us now. Mike, when you told people to get active and be productive, I think most of us thought you were talking about social justice. Why start a bank?
Well, they go hand in hand. You can't have social justice without social equality. And in a capitalistic society, if those who capitalism is built on, the descendants of people who've been enslaved here and the people who are being used as cheap labor now, if those people don't get an active or a role in capitalism or the opportunity to participate, then what are we left with? A permanent underclass. So I believe that part of social justice is making sure that economic justice happens.
I want to go with a false narrative. People who might say, well, these black households maybe just don't have the money for a bank account. That is not true. They are not underbanked because they don't have enough money for a bank account. In the United States, we don't offer financial literacy as part of our education system. And is that why you're doing this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was fortunate to be raised by people that were born in 1922 and 1932. My grandparents raised me. My grandmother's family had been a sharecropping family that earned enough money to buy their own farm, buy their own land. So she came from a more financially secure background than my grandfather, whose dad left when he was in third grade, and he was left there to essentially leave school and work and to take care of sisters. I learned that financial literacy was important. We would march from the bank as early as 5, 6, and 8 years old. Me and my sisters started our first bank account. We're taught our grandmother to balance our checkbooks. I was the worst at it. My sister, who was the best at it, is an accountant at a corporation now. I have to hire her and people like her. But I learned very early to take care of your coin, and your coin will take care of you. I was fortunate enough to be in a household where that happens, but that can be taught to kindergartners, third graders, 6th, 7th graders, and all through high school. And I think that that should be a part of not just home economics once you get to high school. It should be a part of our fundamental education from the time of kindergarten forward.
Me too. I was rolling pennies on rainy days with my grandmother. I want you to speak.
Absolutely.
The Greenwood Initiative. Talk us through what happened in Greenwood, because it is a tragic stain on American history that not enough people understand.
There have been many tragic things on American history in relation to the group of people called blacks in America. And this is one of them that I think is curable and fixable. About 100 years ago, there was a community called Greenwood in Tulsa. And due to racism, bigotry, hatred, and violence, it was destroyed. It was celebrated as a Black Wall Street because blacks that had newly been freed had made their way, had been freed and made their way out west and was helping the country expand west. They created a system in which they had their own schools, their own churches, their own doctors and dentists. They had everything any other community has that can be successful. They turned the dollar 36 times in that community before that dollar left. So that dollar landed in my business, helped enrich me and helped me to employ people to enrich them. It then went to other businesses and did the same thing before it escaped our community. Now, on average, the black dollar only stays in our community six hours, and don't have many of the fundamental businesses that we had doing Jim Crowism, segregation, and things of that nature. So we don't have the ability as a community to gather capital to support one another in the same way. And the way that we can make up for this blight right now is individually getting financially responsible, financially literate, but as a community, organizing our dollars to be the tip of the spear so that we may now have a banking institution that allows for things like car loans, home loans, and will graduate to things like small and medium business loans to incentivize and give capital to businesses that are showing promise and that can grow. And I give Atlanta as an example. If we don't have a mayor like Kasim Reed, our last mayor before Keisha Bottoms, we never get to do a land deal that allows Tyler Perry to have one of the biggest studios in the world that has now not only kept black people working, but kept all Georgians working. The movie industry seems to be moving to Georgia and Atlanta. If we don't have Maynard Jackson 40 years ago, who said that blacks have to be 29 in business and have contracts with the city. We never get a Herman Russell company. We never get the Columbia Group, which is headed by Noah Palea, who ended up partnering with T.I. and I to keep a 50-year-old restaurant called Crankhead Seafood open, and which employs people and will be employed more. So these things are one hand washes to the other, and I think they're necessary. And I think Greenwood is providing a pathway to that.
All right. So that was from MSNBC. Stephanie Rule interviewed Killer Mike. If we go back to the article from CNN, now while the bank Greenwood, the digital bank, does not open until January 2021, the company launched its website on Thursday, right around October 12th, October 13th, and there is already a waiting list for those who want to open a Greenwood account. So now, like its competitors, Chime, Aspiration, Money Lion, and Vero, Greenwood is a digital bank whose financial services include checking accounts and savings accounts, mobile deposits, and peer-to-peer transfers, and these are all fulfilled almost entirely online. The bank offers a global ATM network, Apple and Android Pay services, and 2-day advances on paychecks for customers who sign up for direct deposit. Now, unlike its peers or competitors, however, Greenwood's target audiences are African American and Latinx communities and anyone else who wants to support African American owned businesses. Ryan Glover, founder of Bounce TV, says the bank will specialize in financing African American and Latinx entrepreneurs who typically have a harder time securing loans from mainstream banks. Okay. And then all right, check out the article from CNN.com entitled Killer Mike's New Black-Owned Bank Receives Tens of Thousands of Account Requests in Less Than 24 Hours. Also, check out the article at yourblackworld.net, and we posted it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, dealing with this topic as well. The article I was looking for from Kentucky.com, and we're almost out of time. Oh, damn, I think we're out of time. Trump says he would consider Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron for Supreme Court. This is from Kentucky.com. Trump says he would consider Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron for Supreme Court. So check this out, September 9th, 2020. All right. Those watching on our social media platforms, stay right there. We're going to continue for a few more minutes. The African History Network on Facebook, Michael Imhotep on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, right now is correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Michael Basden. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. Stand by. All right. Let me disconnect this call, because we're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. Stand by. And then we're also here Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. All right. All right, so let's continue here. All right, how's everybody doing? Okay, everybody share this broadcast. We're still here. We'll be here for a few more minutes. We're going to talk about this story coming out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in as well. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay. And through PayPal, you can set up for recurring donation also. So this helps us, especially because we were doing radio one night a week, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Now we're doing 6 nights a week. Okay. So this definitely helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. All right. So thanks. And then all of my DVD lectures are at our web, historynetwork.com, africanhistorynetwork.com. And you can also sign up for the online course that I teach. It's all on demand. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so this other article here dealing with the Breonna Taylor update. This is from newsone.com. Ben Crump calls for new independent prosecutor to seek justice for Breonna Taylor after grand juror speaks out. Ben Crump calls for new independent prosecutor to seek justice for Breonna Taylor after grand juror speaks out. Attorney Benjamin Crump reacted to a grand juror suggesting Daniel Cameron lied while presenting the case. So Crump is calling for a new independent prosecutor to reopen the legal investigation into Breonna Taylor's killing after grand juror suggested that the Kentucky Attorney General's office lied while presenting the case centered on a controversial Louisville police shooting back in March. Now, the civil rights attorney represents Breonna Taylor's family, has already secured them a record settlement for a killing. Let's see here. But thus far, justice has been elusive, with the unidentified grand juror's revealing statement about what exactly was and wasn't presented to the grand jury. Benjamin Crump said Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, quote unquote, failed to do his job. He said, we urge the appointment of a new independent prosecutor to do the work of AG Cameron, AG Cameron failed to do, and seek justice for Breonna Taylor. Benjamin Crump said at the end of a statement that drew attention to Cameron's shortcomings. So read this article here from newsone.com. All right, we'll post this link. And then if we look at this article from NBC News dealing with Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa digs again for victims. Tulsa digs again for victims of 1921 race massacre. Now, a second excavation began Monday, October 19th at a cemetery in an effort to find and identify victims of the 1921 Tulsa race massacre and shed light on violence that left hundreds dead and decimated an area that was once a cultural and economic mecca for African Americans. Okay, and yeah, we're still on, everybody. Okay, I realize. Let's see. Can you all hear me? All right. Phoebe Stubblefield, who is a forensic anthropologist at the University of Florida and a descendant of a survivor of the massacre, who was assisting the search, told the Associated Press, quote, I realize we can tell this story the way it needs to be told now. I realize we can tell this story the way it needs to be told now. And she went on to say, the story is no longer hidden. The story is no longer hidden. We're putting the completion on this. We're putting the completion on this event. Now, the violence happened on May 31st and June 1st in 1921, when a white mob attacked Tulsa's Black Wall Street, killing an estimated 300 people and wounding 800 more. Actually, it's more like close to probably about 1,000 or so who were wounded. You had 1,000 that were left, at least 1,000 that were left homeless. And they had to live in tents over the winter, while robbing and burning businesses, homes, and churches. Quote, people, they were just robbed. White people coming in saying black people had better property than they had, and that was just not right. Phoebe Stubblefield said, whose great aunt was named Anna Walker Woods. And her great aunt had her home burned and property taken. She said, quote, burning, thieving, killing wasn't enough. They had to prevent black people from recovering. Burning, thieving, killing wasn't enough. They had to prevent black people from recovering. Phoebe Stubblefield went on to say, personally, professionally, spiritually, I have an investment in this. Okay, she's a Los Angeles native who says in her early 50s and learned of the massacre and her ancestor, who she doesn't recall ever meeting. She learned about this in the 1990s. Now, the two locations to be searched are in Oaklawn Cemetery in North Tulsa, where a search for remains of victims ended without success in July 2020, and near the Greenwood district where the massacre took place. Now, the earlier excavation was done in an area identified by ground penetrating radar scans as appearing to be a human dug pit, indicative of a mass grave, a human dug pit, indicative of a mass grave. Now, it turned out to be a filled-in creek, said Mayor G.T. Bynum. A filled-in creek, said Mayor G.T. Bynum. First proposed looking for victims of the violence in 2018, and later budgeted $100,000 to fund it after previous searches failed to find victims. Now, the massacre, which happened 2 years after what is known as the Red Summer, okay, the Red Summer of 1919, you've heard me talk about the Red Summer, and the Red Summer occurs is during the Great Migration, and Tulsa is also during the Great Migration, but the Red Summer is the year after World War I ends. You had over 25 major race riots all across the country. So 2019 was the 100th year anniversary of the Red Summer. Numerous articles were written about this. We posted a number of articles about this also. I've done a lecture dealing with the history of the Red Summer of 1919. You had a lot of white people. So what happened was during World War I, you had about 5 million men who went to fight in World War I. World War I is 1914, 18, and the begins is looked at beginning in 1915. Okay, and you're going to have 6 million African Americans migrating from the South up north from 1915 to 1970. Well, when these white men come back home, and when they left, they had jobs. When they came back, those jobs were being filled by African Americans and immigrants who were here also. So you're going to have racial tensions that explode. All right, you have one in Chicago in July 1919. You have them in Elaine, Arkansas, where you have about 200 sharecroppers who are killed. And you're going to have African-American men who served in World War I also, where we learned how to shoot, how to kill. Some of us already knew how to shoot. Some already knew how to shoot because we grew up in the South, and you grew up in the gun culture in the South, grew up on a farm or something like that, learn how to hunt. So when these racial tensions explode, you're going to have brothers who have their guns, served in World War I, and we're defending our communities. And then also around this time, you have with us serving in the war coming back home, you have a tribe, and it's called the New Negro. They were called race men, and they were called the New Negro. Okay. And what they were saying was, we're not going to deal with the same segregation and racism that we've been dealing with. Okay. We fought for this country. We fought for this country. We died for this country. And we want all of our rights now. Okay. We want all of our rights now. So they were called race men. So you're going to have these World War I veterans, and history.com actually has an article that deals with this history of how African-American men defended their communities during World War after World War I, during the Red Summer. Okay, so the attack in 1921 in the Greenwood district, also derisively called Little Africa. The white people called it Little Africa, in North Tulsa, where African Americans lived. That attack is 2 years after summer 1919. Now, one of the best books dealing with the history of Black Wall Street is this book right here by Hannibal B. Johnson, Wall Street from Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood district. This is one of the best books dealing with the history of Black Wall Street. And when I was doing my research on Black Wall Street I did a 2.5-hour lecture dealing with the history of Black Wall Street. When I did my research on it, this was one of my sources for that. Now, you're also going to have a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. A resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, which is going to take place in 1915, and that's also spurred by the movie The Birth of a Nation. Okay, that's going to be spurred by largely spurred by the movie The Birth of a Nation, because the movie The Birth of a Nation debuts February 8th, 1915, and it takes place during slavery, Civil War, and Reconstruction. And it takes place in South Carolina. South Carolina is where the Civil War starts. Civil War starts April 12th, 1861 in South Carolina. All the negative stereotypical images of African Americans are depicted in this movie, The Birth of a Nation. And the hero of the movie is the Ku Klux Klan, which puts down a rebellion of former Union Negro soldiers. Okay. And at the end of the movie, it says this is the birth of a nation. The heroes are the Ku Klux Klan. Now, the movie The Birth of a Nation, when the first 30 days it was out, and history.com has an article dealing with The Birth of a Nation. The first 30 days it was out, it was called the movie was called The Klansman. The Klansman. Now, we had enough sense to know that this movie was detrimental to our existence, because this movie called Race Riots in the Streets. We know President Woodrow Wilson, who's the white supremacist, he had a private screening of the movie at the White House. The movie's directed by D.W. Griffith. Okay, D.W. Griffith, David Rock, W-A-R-K, David Rock Griffith, D.W. Griffith. He directed the film. The film was distributed by a man named Louis B. Mayer. Louis B. Mayer takes the profits that he made from the movie The Birth of a Nation and teams up with two other men named Metro and Goldwyn, and they form Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios. D.W. Griffith teams up with Mary actress from the time, a big actress from the time, Mary Pickford, also Douglas Fairbanks and Charlie Chaplin, and they're going to form United Artists Studios. Okay. But you're going to have the NAACP that protests against this movie. We organize protests. You're going to have protests in Boston, Massachusetts. William Monroe Trotter organized protests against this movie. There's a documentary called Birth of a Movement, that deals with the protests that we organized against the movie The Birth of a Nation. Now, the movie The Birth of a Nation is based upon a novel by a man named Reverend Thomas Dixon. The novel was called The Klansman. Now, before it was a movie, it was a play, and it would travel around the different cities. In 1906, when it's playing in Philadelphia, there were 3,000 African Americans who were protesting against the play, okay, The Klansman. So we knew these things were detrimental to our existence, all right? So we protested against it. If you read Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., in the back when it has milestones in history, look at 1906. It talks about us organizing a protest against the film, against the play, The Birth of a Nation. Okay. And then also read the book, How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. And in that book, it talks about Mayer, Louis B. Mayer, in forming Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios, MGM Studios. If we look at this here, October 22nd, 1906, 3,000 blacks demonstrated and rioted in Philadelphia to protest the Thomas Dixon's The Claimant. Okay, I think that was a play. That wasn't the movie. That was actually a play. 3,000 blacks demonstrated and rioted in Philadelphia. Okay, protesting against the play at the time. And then read How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. Okay, this is from the Nation of Islam Research Group. You don't have to be a member of the Nation of Islam to read it. Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, let's continue. Can you list all these books? Okay, the one from Hannibal B. Johnson, Black Wall Street, From Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood district. Maybe I should start selling these books, because I don't sell books. Maybe I sell my DVD lectures. Maybe I should start selling these books that I always keep talking about. Okay, maybe that'd be easier, because everybody asks, where can I get them from? I always refer people to other places. Hell, maybe I should start selling this stuff. Then Before the Mayflower, A History of Black America. This is the 6th edition. I need a new copy. This is beat up. Lerone Bennett Jr. And then How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. Okay. All right. Now, that's a little background information on this. And I've done a lecture. I've done presentations dealing with Red Summer, all this stuff. Okay. So we're going to re-air some of these. Some of these I have on DVD. So that helps support when you buy the lectures, that help support the African History Network also. All right. So the massacre, which happened 2 years after what is known as the Red Summer of 1919, when hundreds of African Americans died at the hands of white mobs in violence around the U.S. But see, but that ain't just what happened. We shot back too. These brothers weren't playing. We fought back and shot back. So some of them died too. Okay, I'm not wishing harm on anybody. I'm just saying. You know, this article here, it just said hundreds of African Americans died at the hands of white mob. We shot some of them too. Okay. And the attack on Black Wall Street has been depicted in recent HBO shows, The Watchmen and Lovecraft Country. Everybody loves Lovecraft Country. I've never seen Lovecraft Country. I'm sorry. I don't watch a whole lot of serials. Weekly show. I got to tune in, and then if I don't watch this, then I got to binge and all that. I don't watch. I don't have HBO either. Maybe I'll check out Lovecraft Country. I don't know. I see everybody posting about it when my show's on, but I've never seen it before. Now it also received renewed attention. Black Wall Street also received renewed attention after dumbass Donald Trump selected Tulsa, Oklahoma as the location for a June 2020 super spreader rally amid a national reckoning over police brutality and racial violence. Donald Trump moved the date to avoid coinciding with a Juneteenth celebration in the Greenwood district commemorating the end of. Now this is technically inaccurate. It says Juneteenth commemorates the end of slavery. No, it didn't commemorate the end of slavery, because when you study the history of Juneteenth, and I've done like a 3-hour lecture dealing with the history of Juneteenth, you had some slave owners there in Texas, specifically Galveston, Texas, that kept the information away from their slaves, and they held them in bondage until the next year. Okay. One theory is so they could get another year's work, another year's harvest out of the enslaved Africans. So it did not commemorate the end of slavery. What it actually commemorates is June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon Granger delivers General Order Number 3 to the enslaved Africans there in Galveston, Texas. The Union troops, they're going through Texas, delivering General Order Number 3, letting those enslaved Africans know the Civil War is over and you are free, because this was basically 2 weeks after the Civil War officially ended. Okay, earlier in June. Okay, a lot of people say they were freed because they were kept in bondage 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation Proclamation did not it did not actually free the enslaved Africans. That's not what freedom. Okay, January 1st, 1863. That was a proclamation. It was a military strategy designed to bring the South back into the Union. The preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was September 22nd, 1862, and it stated that the territories in rebellion, the Confederate states that were in rebellion, that if they did not come back into the Union, their slaves would be set free. Okay, they would be marked as contraband and set free. It was a military strategy to bring the South back into the Union. Now, when you can go to loc.gov, the Library of Congress website, or archives.gov, National Archives, you could read the Emancipation Proclamation. When you read it, it has all these exceptions in there. It tells you that the slaves in the border states, the border states like Kentucky and Maryland and Delaware, they were still allowed to keep their slaves. Okay. And then the territories that were in rebellion, that seceded from the Union, if they came back into the Union, they were allowed to keep their slaves also. So when you actually read the Emancipation Proclamation, you see it did not free the enslaved Africans. Okay, it's going to be what technically frees them is going to be the 13th Amendment of 1865, ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865. It was not the Emancipation Proclamation, but they're delivering General Order Number 3, June 19th, 1865, and they're delivering it in Galveston, Texas. They're going through Texas to deliver this. June 19th, 1865 is when they deliver it to the enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas. Okay, so that date is commemorated, but it is not commemorating the end of slavery. That's a misunderstanding of it. It's commemorating when those enslaved Africans there in Texas, specifically Galveston, Texas, got the news that they were free. But you're going to have some that are still kept in bondage for another year. Okay, so Mayor G.T. Bynum of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who was 43 years old, said he did not learn of the massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 1921 massacre there in the Greenwood district, until about 20 years ago during the mayoral campaign of his uncle, Bill LaFortune, and his grandparents confirmed the events. Because you have that history really isn't taught in Tulsa. I mean, hell, I knew about it over 20 years ago, and I live here in Detroit. But that history really isn't. It's probably taught more now, but before and for a long time, you couldn't even really find any real historical books on Tulsa, on Black Wall Street either. Quote, that's a very common thing in Tulsa. That's how you learned about it, not through books or the media or in school, Mayor G.T. Bynum said. People didn't start talking about this event in Tulsa until about 20 years ago. Now, bodies, if discovered, will not be disturbed. Bodies, if discovered, will not be disturbed, Mayor Bynum said. The excavation would stop and investigators would, quote, do what they need to do to identify them and determine a cause of death. Do what the investigators would, quote, do what they need to do to identify them and determine a cause of death. Now, efforts would also be made to find any descendants, a project that could prove difficult, according to Mayor Bynum. He said, quote, 100 years after the fact, the descendants are scattered all around the world. Okay. Tracking down the descendants could take years, he said. Somebody said someone should write that book. Which book? Now, on one site to be searched known as the original 18, is where old funeral home records indicate up to 18 African Americans who were massacre victims were buried. Okay, up to 18 African Americans who were massacre victims were buried. The other site is where a man named Clyde Eddy, E-D-D-Y, or Eddie, said in the 1990s that as a 10-year-old boy, he saw black bodies being prepared for burial shortly after the massacre, but was told to leave the area. Now, it's also important to note that you're going to have a lot of African Americans who fled during the massacre. They're going to flee North Tulsa and run into surrounding towns and die there also. So it's believed that the number of 300 killed is actually much higher. There were also reports of seeing, black bodies being dumped into the river, different things like this. Now, archaeologists have identified 2 additional possible sites, said state archaeologist Kerry Stackelbeck, Stackelbeck, Kerry Stackelbeck, who is leading the investigation. Now, Kerry Stackelbeck said, quote, "We have multiple areas that we have identified as having merits for investigation." Now, this was based on the 2019 radar scans. Quote, "We just have to ask for grace and patience," end quote, "during the search. We just have to ask for grace and patience during the search." Now, the latest search is scheduled to last about a week, but could be extended according to Phoebe Stubblefield. Quote, "I'm fully prepared to find human remains," she said. "The questions are just whether they're the remains we're looking for. I'm fully prepared to find human remains. The questions are just whether they're the remains we're looking for." So check out this article. There was some others written also from this is from NBC News, originally from the Associated Press. Tulsa digs again for victims of 1921 race massacre. Tulsa digs again for victims of 1921 race massacre. Now, the probably the most important thing about Black Wall Street in North Tulsa is not that they built this, okay? And it's also important to understand that a lot of early landowners in Tulsa got that land because of the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866 that you hear one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, talk about, and you hear me talk about. And I actually told Dr. Anderson the role that it played in Black Wall Street, because when I was doing my research on this, on Tulsa, and reading this book, I called him and I said, brother, I said, a lot of the early landowners in North Tulsa, a lot of the early African-American landowners got land because of those Indian treaties, because they talk about it in this book, because Tulsa was founded by Creek Indians right around 1836, who get pushed off of their land in southeastern United States because of the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians are forced on what's called the Trail of Tears. They're forced to go over 1,000 miles west, and they all go into Oklahoma, and they take their African slaves with them. Okay. So it's estimated something like about a third of the people that were on the Trail of Tears were Black people, African people. So what's going to happen is that when the Civil War comes, Tulsa comes from the Creek Indian word Tallahassee. This is where the word Tulsa comes from. When the Civil War comes, 1861 to 1865, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians fight on the side of the South, the Confederacy, because they want to maintain slavery. Okay. When they fight on behalf of the South, this violates treaties that they have with the Union. There are clauses in the treaties that state that they can never take up arms against the Union. So before the Civil War, you had, they were on these Indian territories. After the Civil War, those Indian territories are going to be taken back and they're going to be put on Indian reservations. There's stipulations, and then new treaties are going to be signed. There's stipulations that they have to free their enslaved Africans. You're going to have what are known as the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866, and it's going to give rights and land, some type of compensation to those Africans that they were enslaving. They got full citizenship rights into those Native American nations. They were compensated with land. They were compensated with cash payments, all different types of things like this. One of the so allowed the early landowners. It was like about 150 acres of land or 160 acres of land that they got, like head of household, something like that. And then one of the most famous people to receive land because of this was a girl named Sarah Rector. Sarah Rector, Retor. Okay. Sarah Rector. And Rector was known as the rich Negro. Okay. Sarah Rector. He was known as the richest Negro girl in history. Blackpast.org has an article about Sarah Rector that goes through and really breaks down his history. And see, in the early 1900s, oil is also going to be discovered in Oklahoma, in Tulsa. And from the oil is going to create African-American millionaires. So you have something like about 21 African-American millionaires there in Black Wall Street in North Tulsa as well. But oil is going to be discovered on Sarah Rector's land. And in the early 1900s, she's like basically like a millionaire, 13 years old, about her. And she was American. Okay. She was called Afro-American. Can you all hear me? Yeah, she was called Afro-American. Now, contrary to popular belief, the term Afro-American was Afro-American. And then all the term African American was not created by Jesse Jackson. Okay, I hate to burst your bubble. People want to keep saying that nonsense. Okay, March 29th, 1964, when Malcolm X delivers his speech, the ballot or the bullet in Washington Heights, New York, he uses the term African American in that speech. For one. Okay. And then the earliest recorded usage of the term African American is from May 15th, 1781 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay, see the Washington Post and New York Times, they have a couple articles dealing with this. The term African American is older than we thought. So African American is an old term. It's not a new term. Jesse Jackson he reintroduced the term. When I talked to one of my teachers, Professor James Small talks about how we were calling ourselves African Americans in the 1960s. So these people keep saying, "Oh, Jesse Jackson created the term African American." No, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. That's not true. That's not true. All right. So so you have the Civil War, and then you have the Indian treaties that take place, the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866, which is still on the books today. The Choctaw, Chickasaw Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, they're getting cash payments each year. They may get them monthly, but they get cash payments. They get free college tuition, free radio station licenses, TV station licenses. I think probably free taxes as well. Now, many of our ancestors were pushed out of those treaties in 1941 when the U.S. government conspires with the what were known, derisively known as the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, to redefine what a Native American is. So they stated that you had to have 1/4 or 1 quantum Native American blood, but the original treaties did not state that. So many of our ancestors were pushed out of those treaties. Okay. And so we have to study those history. Those that is one of the best chances for those of us who are descendants of those Africans who are getting those benefits. That is one of the best chances of us getting any type of reparations, because they got some type of compensation, and those are laws still on the books right now. Okay, so we have to look at enforcing the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866. Those are laws still on the books right now. All right. To continue the fight that Dr. Claude Anderson is doing, because I talked to him Saturday. I mean, he's 85 years old. I mean, you know, he's had a lot of health challenges just this year alone. I talked to him for about an hour Saturday. All right. Okay, everybody. Hey, if you like this type of information, you could donate to the African History Network. $ the AHN Show through Cash App. $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Then African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. You can advertise on our nightly show now, because my Sunday night show is totally sold out. I do not have any more inventory for the Sunday night show. It's just sold out. But what we do, I create video commercials now. I create video commercials, and we run those when we rebroadcast these shows on Facebook and YouTube. And then the audio, all these shows are in audio podcast format. And I'm uploading more, and you'll have an audio commercial in those the audio podcast. We're on 9 different podcast platforms: iHeartRadio, iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, FM Player, TuneIn, and some other ones. So you can email us a script, 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Don't send me a 2-minute script. There's a 30-second to 60-second commercial. Don't send me a script that's 2 minutes. Okay. 30-second to 60-second commercial. If it's in 30-second to 60-second script, we'll record a commercial for you, or you can just send bullet points. We'll create something for you. If you already have a commercial, that's fine. You can send it to me. No pre-recorded music. Don't send me Cardi B. Don't send me no pre-recorded music, okay? Because this is going to air on YouTube also. Email us, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Jesse Jackson coined the term December 1989. It's a researchable fact. He reintroduced the term. The term was being used before then. Malcolm, watch the damn video of Malcolm X, March 29th, 1964, Washington Heights, New York, Battle of the Bullet. Malcolm used the term in his speech. I got the video of it. We were using the term then. Professor James Small talks about this. You got to talk to the elders. Professor James Small told me, he said, look, we were calling ourselves African Americans in the 1960s. Jesse Jackson reintroduced the term. So if you don't know history, it's new to you, ain't new to the other people. He reintroduced the term. We were using it in the 1960s. Also, when you read the book Malcolm X Speaks, they have the in they have his speech, The Battle of the Bullet, in there. And when you read the speech, he uses the term African Americans as well. This is 1964. That's not a new term. That goes back to 1781 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So you have to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of the existence, as one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Kamene, says. Okay. Oscar Michaud used it in this film. Oscar Michaud used what in his films? Yeah, Oscar Michaud was one of the most, he was probably the most director of those times in 1910 to about 1940s or so. He's 1950. Okay. All right, guys, look, hey, we have to get out of here. Remember, at History Network, we found educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's not over till Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.